We're bringing in David Leopold, an immigration expert, because that has been such a big issue. And David, I wonder if you could contrast what we're going to see with Hassan Minhaj here, a 31-year-old Muslim American who's been very outspoken about what this campaign and this election has meant to him, and the concerns that immigrant and minority, and specifically Muslim minority members feel in this time in America. With what we heard from President Trump just now, I didn't know he was going to read the stake again. That's something he did more at his rallies than recently as president, but that was obviously as direct a symbolic gesture as he could make. What are you thinking about as all this is unfolding tonight?
You know, I mean, I get the political theater, and I get that he's a master politician. I'll give him that. He's a showman, circus showman, if you will. But this was a very disturbing speech. When you sit back and you think this man is the president of the United States, the president of the United States. He's not a candidate. He's not running for office. He's got his hand on the button. And it is very disturbing. None of us are safe tonight. I hate to be so dark, you know, but that's the reality of it. But when you get to the...
No, David, this is hilarious stuff you've got here.
Well, you know, yeah, well, I'm trying to get... I want to be invited to be the comedian next year. No, you know, when you talk about what's happening with Muslims, I think that was your question.
Yes.
Whether it's Muslims or whether it's immigrants in general. You know, these are very, very difficult times. These are very dark times. Muslims have been singled out. No president of the United States ever has tried to ban an entire religion. And this president came into office, and the first thing he did within a week was try to shred the Constitution with that executive order. That executive order that...
Stay with me. I want to mention to folks, we're looking at, again, what is somewhat unusual imagery of President Trump. This was moments ago, going and working his way through the crowd. I mean, he clearly, and Bill Clinton was at times like this, clearly not ready to leave even after he's spoken, really soaking up this 100-day rally. David, I'm going to come back to you, but I want to bring in another person we booked specifically to talk about some of this, which is Oz Sultan, a chief strategist at Sultan Interactive Group, and a Muslim American commentator, and a self-identified conservative. So we really wanted to hear what you had to say, and respond, if you would, directly to what David was arguing, which is that Muslims here feel under attack and feel they've been really illegally targeted.
I think you need to look at what the results were of Muslim Americans who actually got involved in the election. 23% of American Muslims voted for Trump. And you've had a long-standing history of support of conservative ideals and policies going back to the Bush era, if we really look at the American Muslim populace at large. Now, touching on a couple things, touching on, you know, the ban and touching on immigration, we've got some big problems right now in terms of not just, one, looking at folks who are coming in from Syria, but two, I have Muslim friends that work in the immigration department, Muslim friends that work in justice, Muslim friends that work throughout government. And there are divisive and different standards for immigration. And one of the things that Trump had basically spoken to was, like, take 120 days and figure out what exactly should be the protocol and move the protocol forward. Now, things have been thrown out by courts, and I'm assuming where we're sitting right now, they're still evaluating the process.
That's not what he did,
and that process is something that should be ongoing. But where we sit today and where we're moving forward from needs to be a position where we're building. And I think that's what he started to do. He got a American Muslim woman who had been in prison in Egypt out, as well as 8 other folks. You know, so this is a president, I think, who is trying to figure out what is the best way forward when we really haven't had any kind of policy on American Muslims or terrorism over the past 8 years.
All right,
that's
so David, go
true.
ahead.
You know, that's just not true, with all due respect. You know, we can talk about the one woman that he got out of Egypt, and that was fantastic. But what about the doctors? What about the researchers? What about the people who are coming here to do...
What are the total numbers
on
that?
Oz, hold on, Oz. We're going to do this a certain way, which is you went for a while, now David's going to get to go, and then it'll be your turn again.
Fair.
You know, what about the people who come here to contribute, who've been living here in this country, and who were turned around? What about those who want to come here, who have been vetted, and then are not allowed to come here because they can't get visas? You talk about, you know, a 120-day suspension. That's not what that was. If you read those executive orders and you read the fine print, it was indeterminate. It would go on and on and on. And there's no way we can call this all kinds of things, but what he tried to do and what the courts have shut him down on, because we do have a Constitution. And Donald Trump and his supporters in the White House, people like Steve Miller, people like Steve Bannon, Jeff Sessions over at Justice, they don't seem to realize that the Constitution prohibits the president from banning a religion.
There was no ban on the religion. There was a 120-day moratorium, and there was a specific, and just consider this, okay? There was a specific ban on people from 7 countries, several of those countries that Muslim majority countries have also banned people from. So the question you have to ask yourself is...
So if another country discriminates, we're allowed to discriminate?
It's not about discrimination. Maybe you don't understand who Muslim people are, okay? We're not one giant
I understand
monolith.
a lot about a lot of people.
We're a large conglomeration of many different people from many different countries, all right?
Let me put it like
but
this,
we were
Oz. Let me jump in and...
specifically
Oz,
7 countries here.
Let me ask it this way. As we look at the president at the rally and we look at what's going on, did you feel that you saw a president there who was evolving and learning on the job, who had a first plan executive order that got blocked, who adjusted it to a second that got blocked, who also got a procedural setback, as you probably know, on the sanctuary city policy this week? Is he learning and saying whether or not he likes those things, he can live with it? Or did you see someone who was sort of doubling down on everything? Because the reading of the snake poem and some of what he said about the wall seemed to be Donald Trump encased in amber from a year ago, and maybe that is very popular for that crowd. But I wonder what you, as someone who's talking about building or solutions, what do you think? And I'm going to go Oz, then David. It's like a family dinner. You guys both like to talk, which we love. So Oz, David, and then I'm going to bring back in Madison.
Well, I think the thought process here is that he is evolving, okay? If you looked at what he said and how he spoke to this and how he's engaged with Sisi and how he's starting to engage with other partners, you look at what he's doing in the South China Seas, you look at the steps he's taking towards North Korea, you look at Pence's trip over, the 10 days where he has engaged with the ASEAN nations. We are starting to move forward from a foreign policy perspective of strength, which is something we haven't been able to do with either the South China Seas or with what our policy should be towards either Egypt or Syria or the terrorist threats that loom from the many additional conflicts that Obama got us into. So I think he's moving forward from there. But above and beyond that, he's stressing the same things that he spoke to in his inaugural speech, which are black, brown, or white. We all bleed red. We are all to look to America as the Americans that we are to build this country. He's looking towards the future. And that, to me, was not a bad thing.
David, and then Madison.
Well, look, the courts have shut him down, thankfully. The courts stand between us right now and tyranny. If one thing that we have learned, since the inauguration in the last 100 days is that courts matter and that the Constitution matters. And thankfully, we have seen judges thus far who have shut it down. I did not see a president tonight who seems to have learned anything on the job. What I saw tonight was the Donald Trump who campaigned in 2016 and 2015, and who would get up in front of crowds and say whatever he wanted. Look at his record. Look at his record over the last 100 days. What has he accomplished?
He's accomplished a lot.
He's had his executive orders on immigration shut down by the courts on travel bans, Muslim bans, on so-called sanctuary cities. The courts, and how have they done it? You talk about what he says and what he learns. The courts have actually called him on his own words. If you read those opinions, Donald Trump has become his own worst enemy in terms of getting his own agenda through as it relates to immigration and these executive orders. Unfortunately, the one area where he's kept his promise and been able to keep his promise is on the mass deportations, which have been going on all over this country, which affect Muslims in this country, which affect Latinos disproportionately. And unfortunately, what we are seeing are quiet raids called call-ins, where people who are under old administrative orders have to come into ICE. And these are not criminals. These are people these are moms, these are dads, people like Maribel Trujillo in Ohio, people like Roberto Beristain in Iowa, whose wife was a Trump supporter, because Trump said he would only be deporting bad hombres, right? But Trump is not doing that. Trump's ICE deportation force are going after moms, dads, grandmas.
Right.
That's what's going on the ground in this country. They're not, and that's making us all less safe because the limited resources that go to ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the limited resources that go to Customs and Border Protection, those are being used to deport dreamers and to deport people who've never committed a crime.
So let me bring in,
and
as
so
promised,
the bad
'cause
people
I'm gonna
are going
pause.
scot-free.